Hi everyone, thank you again for joining. Welcome to the webinar, Employer Branding and Experience Marketing.
Thank you, Andy. Welcome to today's webinar. Before we dive in, we just wanted to drop a quick note to take a moment and thank you all for joining today, and more broadly for the work that each one of you is doing to lead your organizations through this unprecedented time. It can be unsettling for you, for your teams, for your employees and your candidates. Our goal today and over the coming months is really to provide you with the insights and resources to help you do your job as effectively and as personally as possible. While we have all tried our best to be in a quiet spot in our homes to deliver this webinar to you today, please do excuse us if you hear your dog barking or other unexpected sounds in the background. A quick round of introductions. I'm Kumar Bhaya. I lead Cielo's go-to-market and client solutions function in Asia Pacific. I'm based in Singapore. And we have a great lineup of speakers today. First up is Andy Kerr-Lewis. Andy leads our global employer brand and digital practice. Then we have James Williams, who heads up the talent acquisition function for Johnson & Johnson in Southeast Asia. And last but certainly not the least is Nikhilesh Mathur, head of talent acquisition for the RELX Group in Asia Pacific. We will kick off today's session by defining what employer branding and experience marketing really means, especially in today's context. We all love good examples of what other firms are doing in this space, and we will be sharing plenty of them, including from two diverse firms like Johnson & Johnson and the RELX Group that are in different stages of their brand journeys. Our friends James and Nick will share their respective journeys in this space. We will then share some trends we are seeing as a result of the current pandemic, and also what some other firms are doing around their employer brand messaging during this time. Lastly, we will capture some key themes from these examples that you can then hopefully take away and apply in your own organizations. As mentioned, please share your questions or comments through the chat feature on the right. It's great to see so many friends and associates register for today's webinar. But for those who may not know much about Cielo, very briefly, Cielo is the world's leading strategic recruitment process outsourcing or RPO provider. We leverage our global reach, local talent acquisition expertise, and customized solutions to help clients achieve a sustained advantage and outstanding business outcomes through their talent practices. With our global presence, including 2,000 employees, we serve 176 clients across more than 100 countries across 39 languages. In line with today's theme, let me now hand over to Andy Kerr-Lewis, who will take us through the evolving world of employer branding and experience marketing. Over to you, Andy.
Thank you, Kumar. Very kind for opening up and setting the scene. So my name again is Andy Kerr-Lewis. Good to meet you all. I'm now going to just talk us through and just set the scene a little bit as to employer branding and what we mean by experience marketing. So first up, just to confirm, I look after the employer brand and marketing part of the business. It's a full service talent marketing proposition whereby we look after employer brands, social media, websites, content, and creative. I think one of the interesting things around the current market, and certainly notions of employer branding, is really just to take a step back and think about why we focus on these areas. Why are they important in terms of our talent strategies? So traditionally, we've talked about the war for talent and talent pools and communities. Those of us that are global organizations or regional, we think a lot about local. Of course, for many of us, we've been focused on one brand or the candidate experience. We talk about things such as being authentic. And in recent times, we had some new friends in the buzzword bingo community. So artificial intelligence, technology, automation, and of course, the very future of work. In many respects, are we seeing the current pandemic accelerating what we consider to be the future of work from 5 years to maybe even 5 weeks as virtual onboarding and remote working and very significant structural changes in contracts really does accelerate. So what does this mean for talent, and why, therefore, are some of these practices important? Well, of course, the traditional views on recruitment in particular are evolving rapidly with some of these macro trends, whether those be generation and skills gaps, the gig economy, or indeed technology and some of the fast-moving changes that you will see happening in consumer trends. And so we don't even call it recruitment much anymore. We've rebranded it to talent engagement. And at the heart of this is some quite different requirements as to how we go about things. So communities and talent pools very much need a segmented approach for different talent groups or geographies. We really need to consider the full talent life cycle. And of course, we need to be a lot more consistent in our use of data, channels, and technology. And fundamentally, for leaders in talent, the outcomes that we're focused on are really progressing from some of our table stakes of time and cost to hire or retention into true business performance. So one of the things that we've seen a lot of in the market, and our experience with many of you, is that people's view on the traditional notion of employer branding is beginning to change. So whereas employer branding has traditionally focused on the infrastructure of value propositions or careers websites, really we've seen a significant move to make sure that we're no longer just considering the talent, the employee and the candidate. But the reason for this is that we're recognizing that there are actually many stakeholders that are involved in making sure that this is successful, that the employer brand experience is working, and that our talent solutions are as effective as possible. So we're just going to talk you through what we mean by that. If we just take a step back and say, well, what is an employer brand? Is it just about the company reputation? Well, in fact, it all depends on experience. And in many respects, it's the sum of all the experiences that you have with an organization, and in many respects, what differentiates that organizations from others. And one of the key stats that we find interesting at the moment is that 85% of people are more likely to stick with a brand through a crisis if that brand is transparent. So when we think about the traditional forms of employer branding, let's consider that against consumer marketing. So the doyen of consumer marketing is Mr. Coca-Cola, Sergio Zyman. And he always said that the sole purpose of marketing is to sell more stuff to more people, more often, at higher prices and more efficiently. There's simply no other reason to do it. Well, if that's the case, then the sole purpose of employer branding is to match more jobs to more people, more often, at greater mutual value. And there's simply no other reason to be doing it. So as you can see there, there's a chart describing a view on talent magnetism, which is very much a recent lens to make sure that we've got sustainable practices. Now, actually, what we also recognize is there are many different stakeholders which are really important, and having that holistic view of experience marketing can be critical. The talent lifecycle doesn't stop at onboarding. It goes all the way through into performance and indeed beyond into alumni. So how can we make sure that we've got a really clear view as to what's important to the business? Is it cost orientated? Is it more about risk, making sure that we've got the right people in the right place to keep innovating? Or is it actually a significant focus on growth? And each of these different stakeholders will play a really important part in a successful employer brand and indeed people strategy. Of course, culture, vision, and values must sit at the top at CXO. The CFO will have a very clear view as to financially and from a sustainability perspective, what is important. Clearly, technology and digital, CMO and communications, individual business leaders, all the way through to some of our traditional stakeholders will be important. And of course, what now happens with the bots and the robots and the algorithms, which are increasingly taking over. So how do we get that balance right? And of course, how do we focus all of this on making sure that we're sustainable for both our customers and indeed our broader environment? Quick example of this, this is a firm that we support called Surgical Care Affiliates. On top of all the traditional employer branding that SCA very much focused on, one of the things that they recognized was a need to actually re-engage and communicate what HR was to the internal business leaders. And so in this scenario, we supported them in transforming them into talent and culture and launching new programs such as the CEO program, which stood for the Chief Engagement Officer, each team of which had one to represent culture and engagement throughout. So quite a different way of approaching things. The other example that we thought we would talk to is what people are increasingly referring to as digital anthropology. What do we mean by that? Well, it's the appropriate relationship between humans and some of the digital era technology. I'll give you an example of what we mean by that. Many of us are rolling out new technologies and new systems. These technologies are fantastic. Workday is another current favorite, of course. However, rolling them out, implementing them, and then more importantly, driving the appropriate adoption and user is actually not such an easy thing. And so what we're seeing here is a need for experience marketing to make sure that we're really clear as to what it is that we're doing here, why the new platform is important, and how people should be going about and using it. So again, another example of that broader experience marketing. So with that said, I would like to now hand over to James to talk about the Johnson & Johnson story. James, over to you.
Great, thanks Andy, and thank you Kumar for the invitation to present to everyone today. What I'd like to talk to you about is around the journey that J&J have been on, and it's certainly not a finished journey yet. It's ongoing, and I think, you know, as we look at some of those keywords, the war for talent and how we digitize our approach, it's a journey that probably won't end. We've always got to be looking forward as to where are we heading next. To start us off, I'd like to give you a quick introduction into who we are as J&J, because this tells a key part of our story. When most people hear Johnson & Johnson, they immediately think about baby products. And, you know, that's where our name is, that's where the brand was big. But as you can see from this slide, we actually touch across multiple sectors within the healthcare industry. We're in fact the largest and most diversified healthcare company in the world. And with the products that we have, our products will touch the lives of over 1 billion people across the globe every day. So this opens up part of our challenge. How do we go about really telling people who we are when immediately when they hear our name, it goes to one small part of our business? We started to think about our candidates. And if you jump to the next slide, it's about thinking about our credo and our value. Within the J&J credo, the first paragraph says, we believe our first responsibility is to the mothers, fathers, and all others who use our products and services. And for us within talent acquisition, our candidates are our customers. And the bad experience that a candidate has does not only impact our brand or our ability to be able to identify and attract the best talent in the market, but it can also impact the bottom line. 42% of unhappy candidates are less likely to purchase your products again. And you can see by the size of a business like J&J, that can have a significant impact to the business. We also are thinking about our impact on market. How do we go about ensuring that our recruiters are able to attract the best talent? And, you know, by giving a candidate a bad experience, they're unlikely to promote J&J as a place to work to their friends and family. And we all know about the barbecue conversation. You know, we want someone who's going to be sitting there promoting J&J, even if they weren't successful for the role that they'd applied for. So we've embarked on a journey, and this started back in 2017. We needed to think about how would we go about measuring our journey of change. So back in 2017, we launched our NPS survey. So all candidates who were applying for roles at J&J would be sent a survey. Those questions would differ depending upon the step in the process they would get to, but it meant that we could set a baseline of what was the view of the external market as to the experience within our application process. We wanted to think about how could we really lift a light or shine a light on our process. So in 2018, across Asia Pacific, we launched J&J Shine. Shine is our candidate experience portal, which provides insights to candidates throughout the process, letting them know which stage they're at with each application they may have with us, what to expect at that stage, any tips or hints that could help them, and also access to a Twitter feed, which meant they could ask any questions they may have to best support someone throughout the process. We followed this in 2019 by going live with our new fit for purpose recruitment model. So the experience wasn't just around the products that a candidate would get to touch, but also around where was our process the best fit for that person. So we need to think about how does our recruitment process work at each level of the role that we would hire. And we've implemented 5 different recruitment models. They span from our university hiring through to wage and up to executive. Within those processes, we're able to tailor the experience for the candidate depending upon the speciality or seniority for them. Within that, trying to ensure that we're giving them the best experience possible and make sure that when they're coming to J&J, we're not giving someone at an entry level the same experience as we would with a senior director, for example. So with all of these new processes in place, we need to start thinking about our attraction. And this is where we move to looking at our employer brand. We needed to start by understanding where do we stand in the market. We had our own perception, but we wanted to ensure that we really got the flavour of what the market thought of Johnson & Johnson. And this table gives you an insight into where we stand from the market size and identifies the gaps that we had. You know, the race for talent is tough and people want to work for bold innovators and work in environments that are deemed as fun and friendly. Now, J&J sat within the banding of ethical employer and a good citizen. And certainly, you know, not something that we wouldn't want. You know, we're very happy to see that we were seen as an ethical employer, but at the same time, did that really set us up for future? And did that mean that we could compete in the marketplace that we deemed we would need to identify and acquire the skills which would help us future-proof the business? So up at the top with bold innovators, you can see the usual names: Apple, Amazon, Samsung have been on a massive journey to be able to bring themselves up to that level. And that's been through, you know, some strong branding campaigns. So we need to start thinking about how do we go on our journey to be able to move to those new areas and be seen as to, you know, really replicate some of the work we're doing and talking about some of the innovations that we're working on, but at the same time not losing who we are and ensuring that we still were an ethical employer and deemed as someone who was a good citizen within the global community. So the journey we needed to take was to step from, if we could jump to the next slide, it was the evolution of how we present ourselves to market. We were seen as traditional, stodgy and stagnant. There was personal security, but you know, it was just a standard career path to work your way through the layers of management. Whereas if I refer back to the first slide I showed, you can see that actually as a company, we're extremely diversified. And within that, we can offer opportunities for people to build a career with broad exposure across the different sectors of our business, rather than joining a job or a specialist function which someone would have a linear career path through. So we needed to move ourselves towards being a cutting edge innovator. How do we go about talking to the market around some of the innovations that we're working on? How do we talk about being bold and dynamic and some of the steps in technology that we've had to take to be able to address some of the new needs within the medical market? And within that, not only working as J&J, but working in partnership with the healthcare community to be able to provide the best solutions for those that need it. Again, I refer back to the credo. Our first commitment is to the people who use our products. And in order to do that, we have to be at the front line and cutting edge of technology that we're using. So we needed to think about the candidate and how do we bring them into our story? So the challenge was set after we had done the initial branding across the globe as to how do we put our statement into one line. And the statement that came up, if we jump to the last slide, is our promise in one line. When you join J&J, your next move could mean our next breakthrough. This really opens the door for meaningful conversation. It opens the door for candidates to understand what they can add to J&J, to let everyone know that they have a role, being at the front line, being able to make a breakthrough that can make a difference to those communities that need it. And we've started to work through how we'll bring this to market, and it brings us to our current day. Our next step now, what we'll be working on throughout 2020, is how do we bring this brand to market, and how do we go on continuing that journey to be able to bring not only more talents, but the right talents through to experience the processes and the portal that we have built for them. So there is a video that we will share with you after the webinar. Unfortunately, we can't play it now, which will give you a bit of an insight into our approach to market and our message to the candidates. But as I said, this is our ongoing journey, and one, you know, very much enjoying taking part in, and one that we've had to evolve as we've been working on it. Obviously, with 2020 being the year of our employer brand, we're not in our usual state of play. The candidate markets are not as they were at the end of last year. And we're now having to think about how do we best adapt our brand and our approach to market to take on the challenges that are facing us today and tomorrow. Thanks, Andy.
Fantastic, James. Thank you so much. Just a couple of questions, actually. How do you feel? Were some of those market perceptions of the Johnson & Johnson proposition, did they come as a surprise to some of the leaders internally, or actually was that expected to a certain degree, do you think?
Yeah, I think no, it wasn't a surprise is the honest answer, because as we have gone through this journey, we realized how many people internally didn't actually realize the journey that we were on, and some of the cutting edge technology we were working on. So again, it emphasized the need for us not only to think about our employer brands to the external market, but also the use for that brand internally. So again, J&J have always been quite conservative in how they go about promoting themselves. I think this is about us finding that middle ground, so we don't lose who we are, but we're able to more actively share that message.
Fantastic. And sorry, one last question for me. Love the employee portal. I'm interested to know what really enabled you to get that signed off. Do you think that the business really understood experience and growth, or do you feel that it was an efficient and scalable way of being able to deliver a number of different activities? Was it a blend of the two, or was one of those drivers more important than the other, do you think?
I think our real enabler was getting data behind the problem. So the recruiters on the front line would be hearing feedback and would have more of a sense of what was happening. But it's never as impactful as being able to go to senior leadership and be able to back the conversation with data. And by implementing the candidate surveys, we were able to then pinpoint where were our biggest challenges and how could we really make a difference to be able to, proactively make change, and with our effort being made in the right place rather than trying to cover all things for all men. Really make effective change. And as I say, that journey continues, that feedback is still reviewed, and it helps us shape what our next steps will be as well.
Fantastic. Thank you, James, and apologies everyone for the PowerPoint constantly slipping out, the joys of technology in the new digital world. So well done for managing to carry on through that, James. Thank you. Good. Okay.
Excellent. So Andy, I'm assuming it's not a child or a pet dancing on your keyboard. Apologies to everyone for the toggling in and out of presentation mode. Is just technology. What can we say? Let's invite our next guest, Nick. Would you like to share your journey at RELX Group, please?
Sure, Kumar. Thank you so much, and thanks to you and Andy first for inviting me to share our journey. I don't know. I don't think a lot of people know about RELX, and I certainly didn't when I joined the company. So maybe just a context of what got us started on our journey. RELX is actually a group and a holding company for a number of different brands. And you'll see on the slide in the lower orange banner, each of our companies has a different name, a different logo, a different brand. And for all practical purposes, these are independent companies that run on their own. They have their own management teams, they have their own products, they have their own solutions that they target different client segments. And a couple of years ago, we started to realize that collectively we are a massive group. We employ over 35,000 employees worldwide. We have a collective market capitalization of over 50 billion US dollars. Our annual revenues collectively are over 10 billion US dollars. And yet nobody knows us, and yet nobody really thinks of RELX as a employer of choice. So we knew we had to do something about that. I think independently or individually, if you look at each of our group companies, we do have strong brands, but the process, what got us started in the process was to start thinking about how do we leverage the strengths that we have in individual companies, and how do we bring it all together to have a greater impact when we go to market. So that is what got us going. I think the other piece that there were quite a few challenges that we were hoping to solve as we started on our journey. Many of our businesses are actually really old. We trace our legacy back almost 400 years in certain businesses, to the very early days when we used to actually publish books and journals, whether that's Elsevier that published journals and books in the medical healthcare sector, or LexisNexis that started with publishing in the legal sector. And we've actually gotten to a point where the business itself is changing. Publication today is not the same as it was even 10 years ago. More and more content is being consumed online and in digital format. And so the businesses themselves were on a journey to transition from traditional publication to modern age data analytics groups that we are now. And so while that journey was being undertaken on the business level, we were also looking internally at how our employees were undergoing that journey themselves. And for some, it was more challenging than the others. We do have a very, very diverse group of skills within the organization. We still have people who were involved in traditional publication in the past. And then we have the new bunch of skills that we're hiring, which is all about data science. And so how do we carry these people together on one journey so that they really understand how we can have an impact on candidates collectively as one team? And as we started to think about that, we realized that there was three broad themes that we probably need to tackle. And as we go on the journey, I'm sure there'll be others that come along. Again, similar to what James mentioned earlier, this is more of a journey than an end state goal for us. We started by thinking like a candidate. What is it that a candidate wants to see? And we realized that obviously they need information before they speak to us. They need to know about us. And that's one of the first things that we started to tackle. How do we deliver information to the candidates in the best possible way? And that's part of the branding journey, but it was more targeted towards getting them, making them aware of who we are as a group. And then looking internally, we realized that to deliver good experience to candidates, it's not just delivering information to them, but we also need to look internally within ourselves around the behaviors that we are exhibiting. And many a times those behaviors are tied to the processes that exist within the company. And so we realized that we had to look at some of those processes as well. So what I'd like to share today, and this is by no means a lot of information, but just some examples of where we got to. On the next slide, we started with our EVP, obviously. Again, each of our group companies has their own employee value proposition. It was very important for us to tie these 5 and 6 different EVPs back to who we are as a group and the strengths and the contributions that we have as a RELX group, beyond what individual group companies have. So we went through an exercise with our marketing teams, with our recruiting teams, and feedback from our employees to look back at what the EVP really means to them. And just as an example, one of our group companies is Elsevier. The EVP there is Discover Elsevier, because we are in the healthcare research industry. And so it's all about figuring out what's going on. And we're at the forefront of the COVID situation right now, in fact. But then Discover Elsevier means something different in Japan or in India or in China, because our target pool of candidate and our target skills are very different. And so we are now in the process of tying the EVP and localizing it to each country. What does Discover Elsevier mean in Japan, where we're hiring people that might be in their 50s or in their 60s? And what would it mean for someone in India, where we're hiring probably a lot of people in technology in their 20s, or in China, where we might have a very diverse pool of talent spread out across a very large country? And so it means different things. And at the end of the day, we're localizing the brand narrative linked to our EVP, but it is all rooted back into the one EVP. And similarly, the Elsevier EVP is linked back to our RELX vision and our RELX values, which then feeds further into all of our different divisions as well. So in a way, all of our group companies are tied together, and there's one consistent thread that runs across the group. I think similar to most organizations that do this now, we have listed our culture, our values, our inclusion, and the diverse workforce that we have. We've listed all of this on our website. That's something that the candidates need to see. If you could go to the next slide, I've shared a few screenshots of what candidates see when they get to our website. So thank you. This is a couple of screenshots from the Elsevier Careers website. And we realized that we're hiring a diverse set of skills. And so we've created targeted pages for the different skill sets so that candidates can actually go there and, let's say somebody's in technology, they want to know what kind of careers do we offer for people in technology versus healthcare. And so we broke it down into the key segments that we tend to hire for. And within each of those segments, we further created a whole experience page for candidates to say, this is what we do, this is our vision, these are the kind of people that we support right now. So as you can see here on the healthcare page, we support health executives, we support nurses and doctors and physicians and pharmacists. We provide them the information and the data that they need to make quick decisions and to make decisions that actually help improve health worldwide and improve the health of the patients. If you could please go to the next slide. Here's another example on the healthcare page. As an example, we've showcased some of our employees and their career journeys so that candidates can actually come in and see what they can expect. And one of the things that's been very important here is if a story is too good to be true, it probably is. And so we specifically asked these individuals to talk about the challenges that they faced along the way and how they managed to work over the challenges. So that's good, hopefully good information for the candidates to see. We talk about why candidates should join us and the kind of skills and the kind of environment that we can offer them. The visual on the right-hand side is a story that we want to tell candidates for Elsevier, who we are, why they should look at us, and what really are we looking for in a candidate. So this is for Elsevier. On the next slide, you'll see what we have done for LexisNexis, which is very similar again. We talk about why they should join us, who are we looking for. We have some individuals that we've showcased on our website. I think particularly in the current environment, we were one of the few companies who started very, very early. In fact, in February, we realized that we would have to be virtual very soon in how we operate. And again, thanks to our Elsevier business, which is at the forefront of the COVID situation, we knew very, very early that we had to do this. So if you could go to the next slide, please. We took very early decision to actually protect our employees, of course, and our recruiters, but we also realized that candidates probably don't realize how difficult it can be interviewing in a virtual environment. So we wanted to help them. And so we have resources on our website to guide them through this particular situation. We're providing tips to them on how they can get better in a virtual interview environment. And these are just some of the screenshots that I've shared from our website. If you'd like, you can just go there and see. There's a lot more there. So this is where we started off with the information that we wanted to share with the candidates. I guess the other two pieces, which is the processes and the behaviors, they kind of go hand in hand. And that's why I've kind of put them on the slide together. We are in the process of developing training for all employees on talent attraction. And one of the key messages that we're delivering to anybody we speak to is talent attraction is a shared goal. It's not just an HR responsibility. We have to remember we end up hiring one candidate. There are many more that do not get the role. And those candidates are or could become brand ambassadors for us. And so it's very, very important to deliver strong experience. We realize that there are a lot of roadblocks in the journey to deliver experience. We all work in very matrix organizations. Matrix itself can be a huge roadblock. We are working in organizations that are changing. Just within RELX, our group is changing. HR is in a transformation. The roles within HR are being redefined. And so that is an important aspect that we're working on, to clearly define roles and responsibilities and to communicate that, not just to HR, but to everyone involved in the talent attraction process. We're covering a range of topics from the kind of experience that we can deliver to candidates through the interviewing process, but even small things like how quickly should we respond to candidates and what should be the quality of that communication. We are engaging the help of the broad team beyond HR to create a shared ownership of the entire process so that it doesn't become one person's or one team's responsibility. It's everyone's responsibility to deliver strong experience. And we've come to realize in the conversations we're having that managers actually appreciate this, because many of them don't recruit enough and they're not very used to it. And many of them actually feel worried when someone asks them to interview. So when we give them a structure, they actually like it because now they know what's required and it's not unknown to them. On the process side, again, because sometimes processes influence behaviors, we're just asking a number of questions. And I've just listed those here for your reference. Many of these continue to be ongoing conversations. We are asking questions like, can we automate a process? Can we prioritize processes? Is there something that can be done today versus something that needs to be picked up tomorrow? How much of the information do we have with us already? Do we really need the process in the first place? For sometimes we just have a process that's been going on for such a long time. People forget why we needed it in the first place. And so asking that question is an important, and we realize sometimes we just have to take away the process and it improves the experience significantly. We talk about where the processes interlay, where they cut across other processes and how do they work with each other so that we can make them more efficient. The handoffs, I think in the words of a very famous person, we are trying to simplify the processes. And as we are on those journey, we are seeing that with small changes, the behaviors are starting to change. And we're talking to candidates. we are assessing candidates. We are running surveys with candidates to understand what they're experiencing, and we're starting to see a good some good feedback from candidates around their experience. So overall, it's still a journey. We're still very early in this, but I think we're starting to understand that we're on the right track, and we'll see where we end up eventually, but we're excited by the possibilities with the direction that we're taking. So that's it from RELX. I'll probably hand back to Andy.
Nick, thank you so much. And we did have a couple of really good questions come in around matrix organizations and the relationship between a division and group, and you managed to answer those brilliantly as you went through. So thank you very much indeed. Okay, well, as we just move into the final section now, what we wanted to do was to have a quick lens on the current pandemic and beyond the great stories that Nick and James have shared. Just have a think about some of the trends and some of the good things that we're seeing. And one of the questions that's come in is, are there any good examples of what healthcare organizations are doing looking for specific talent, such as doctors or nurses? So we've got a couple of good examples there as well, as I continue to fight this technology, which keeps popping out. So thanks for bearing with us. So just a couple of things here. So again, the word unprecedented, it's unprecedented how many times everyone's saying unprecedented at the moment, but we are seeing some incredible change in customer and talent markets. Folks always used to say that brands are most likely to be made at the top, or broken at the top of a boom or bottom of a bust. And we're seeing some really interesting things happening at the moment. So inclusive and collaborative cultures are proving more agile than some of those traditional command and control hierarchies. We're seeing a super need for personalization. And as you can see from both Nick and James's, there's a significant focus on really thinking about what our career proposition means to different people. Of course, what we're also seeing, web traffic is soaring. We see a lot of people either looking for work because they've left or they are concerned about their future. And of course, there's another really big thing, and that is the need for us to be nurturing and engaging much larger talent pools and communities of people for longer and with highly nuanced messaging. So the machinery is still important, but if the machinery is your EVP and your processes, then the oil is content and reputation management. And you can see some stats at the bottom there. For example, from Kantar, there's been a 70% increase in web browsing year on year, whilst we see the stats around social media engagement globally is 61% increase. WhatsApp is at the fore of that, but actually for WeChat and Weibo, we see a 58% increase. So we're seeing a significant change in who is consuming what content. Here's some really good examples of some of our clients and organizations which are doing some interesting communication. So Becton Dickinson, with some quite traditional, not all heroes wear capes, advertising, celebrating the contribution that they're making to doctors and nurses. Here's another great one from a healthcare client of ours in North America. And it's a little bit more edgy and grittier, if you like, than the traditional heroes and capes, in the sense that being on the front line takes courage and resilience. And obviously this is set within the year of celebrating nurses. Mundi Pharma, they're a lot more practical in what it is that they're going to be doing in helping the market. So we promise to support you to think differently and make an impact. Together we can overcome, and some very specific messages in that way. Of course, as we take a step back, we see a lot of the major brands really thinking about either social distancing and being quite smart and engaging around it, and responsible. And this is not just around talent, this is really around our broader communities. And you can see Tokyo 2020, Volvo, and Nike there as well. Another great example of good practice, Hilton, as they looked at obviously their residence and room occupancies falling, they needed to make their staff available to others. And rather than just furloughing or laying many people off, they created a really cool platform which allowed those employees of theirs to see which other companies which were hiring and how that might work for them. And as you can see on that Amazon example, you would click on the career section within the internal portal for Hilton. You would then see all those companies that were looking to hire. You click on Amazon, and it would have a bespoke and personalized message for those Hilton employees. So some really great examples of what's been happening. Of course, what this does mean is that the kind of content that we're sharing is very much changing. And so as you can see here, we do definitely have a very different kind of content. So safety, security, flexibility, and gratitude, very important for us to be appropriate at the current time, but at the same time, still communicating important aspects of what we're doing. Finally, a tale of two fast food competitors, both McDonald's and Burger King, obviously well-known brands, big global brands that really think a lot, not just about their consumer brands, but about their people. And again, you could see some significant efforts and initiatives from those, not just around some of the consumer marketing, but being really clear as to communicating to their employees what this meant for them, whether there was furlough or sick pay, and what the structure was as well. So some really important communications that came out. Before we wrap up, I guess Nick and James, just a question back to your good selves. Any kind of thoughts as to what next and on what a particular focus might be in the coming weeks and months that you might not already have covered off? James, why don't we just throw that to you first?
Yeah, I think, you know, we're forever looking what next, and as I said, it's an ongoing journey, and we're not sure what the challenges of tomorrow will look like as we look at our new ways of working. I think for us, and where we need to be smart around the way we look at this, is how do we build sustainable models as we implement our employer brand? Because, you know, all the global finances are going to be rocked by the pandemic. So we need to think about how can we be smart that we can utilize tools that we already have or free tools on market to be able to ensure that we can still be proactive with our employer brand and ensure that we keep our presence during the difficult times. So how that comes to light, you know, I mentioned before around our employees becoming our advocates, looking at building our advocacy models, but then also exploring what else is on the market that we don't know about yet.
Fantastic. And what about you, Nick? What are RELX thinking?
I think we're still on a journey that is very early, and we need to see where it leads us, and if our initial hypothesis really stands out in the end. I think the things that we are starting to think about is the impact this outbreak will have on what people really want from an organization going forward. I think there is broad agreement that we're hoping telecommuting and virtual working is going to be the new norm, but then it's bringing up new challenges for organizations around mental health and building team engagement and stuff like that. And how do we as organizations create platforms that deliver information to the candidates that makes them see that, you know, we as a group stand out as compared to other organizations. Again, it's very, very early days because so far, you know, everyone's just been fighting to stay safe. But I think as we start to come out of this situation, more and more organizations, including RELX, will start to think about the environment that we provide to our candidates, and obviously by extension, how do we communicate that to our candidate pool as part of our branding. There was a very good article I read the other day on Forbes magazine around the need for a chief health officer in large organizations now, because this virtual environment and technology driven environment will create unique set of challenges that most of us are not prepared for. So it remains to be seen, where that leads us, but certainly something that we are starting to think about.
Yeah, fantastic. Good. Okay. Well, perhaps let's wrap up with a few things to think about for everyone tomorrow. I guess number one, know your audience, whether that be current employees, future candidates, employees, and alumni. Who's going to see your message? How are they going to feel about it? Let's make sure that we're reflecting the brand's mission, vision, and values, and let's not try and become something that we weren't before. And then I guess really the final piece is let's make sure that our content is relevant, accurate, and appropriate. Remember, of course, that us humans are driven by the head and the heart, and how do we make sure that we get that balance right? And so I think for us, when we're thinking about content, how do we make sure that we're appealing to both the head and the heart, and that it differentiates? The final piece, really, before I hand over to Kumar, is, hey, we've got some new co-workers, and for those of us that aren't used to working from home or remotely, and we've got some very unexpected ways of working, not least of which was this PowerPoint that kept popping out during the webinar. So just a thank you to everyone for attending, and just a reminder that not everything always works as you would expect it to do so, but if I could ever keep the straight face that this newsreader does, that would be a great end to the proceedings. Kumar, do you want to wrap up?
Thank you, Andy. And it's interesting you showed us that news reader, because incidentally, I believe that that's a newsreader from BBC, but the correspondent based for APAC, based out of Singapore. And what's even more interesting is that that video was actually pre-COVID. So it's very interesting that what was seen as a joke across social media, etc., has become pretty much everyone's reality globally. So just wanted to thank James and Nick particularly for taking some time out to join us for this session. Really thank you for that, and thanks again, Andy, as well, for sharing your lens for the pandemic as you speak with so many different prospects and clients and folks in the industry, especially around the employer brand and how that needs to adopt and adapt within the environment. I think if you think about words like empathy and authenticity, transparency, caring, I mean, they hold more weight and value today than they ever have. And if you think about the messages that come across the different webinars you might be attending, or the different articles around what the new normal might looks like, it's really about how companies are treating employees and candidates, and how they treat them during this pandemic will really define the company brand for years or maybe even decades. Because at the end of the day, people might forget what you said, but they will never forget how you made them feel. So I'd like to close today's session by just inviting everyone to visit our COVID-19 Talent Acquisition Resources Center on our website. This has some interesting tips, insights, articles on virtual interviewing, virtual onboarding, adapting your employer brand as well. We will also be including this particular webinar recording there on that particular site, and also be sending this webinar recording to all of the folks who registered, those who attended, as well as those who could not attend. So with that, thank you very much, and we hope to see you at our next webinar. And till then, stay safe and stay well.